Hi, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to the EPIC podcast, the podcast where anybody can inspire everybody. Now, this week, my friend Mohan Belani joins us at the EPIC podcast. Well, he so happens to also be the co founder and CEO of E27. Join us this week as we chat about everything under the sun, about running a business, starting out, and all the mistakes that he's made along the way. I have no idea how I'm going to edit this, but who knows? Just stay tuned.
Man.
Hey, buddy.
How are you?
I'm good, man. What are you doing? You look like you just worked out.
Yeah, I just finished a run.
No wonder you're all sweaty.
I'm all tired. Yeah.
But it's good, at
Right.
least. Hey, it's good that you're making what do you call that? You're making time for a run and all that, no?
Yeah, I mean it's I try to keep fit, right? Like I think not just physical, but on the mental level is super helpful. It's funny, during army I really never cared about all these fitness stuff. Like to me it was a chore and a drag. And it's only after army I started to appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah,
I was
because
way fitter after army than during army.
yeah, I
Funny, it's
completely
so ironic.
understand. A lot of us are all doing this at the same time, that like that sense of like, hey, I need to get fit. How come I'm not as fit as before? Do you realize that a
Yeah.
lot of us came out right, with a heightened sense of competition?
Um So let me see. Okay, so when I was in unit, so the unit I was in, I mean, fitness really wasn't a priority, but my division RSM was a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
So like to me, like there was that aura, like, whoa, this guy is like freaking Navy SEAL, right? It's only when I went to uni, right? I went to NUS, and then I was part of this mountaineering team. So for that, you have to be bloody fit, right? But like, that's when I started to meet the Dragon Boat people. I started to meet people from different walks, right? And their idea of fitness, right, and how they got to where they are was very inspiring. And then I also started to take it a bit more seriously. Like some of them, like I remember back then, they aspired to be firemen. They aspired to be like OBS instructors. Like they aspired to have lifestyles where fitness were a core part of what they do. So that for me, fitness was all about tekan and pain, right? Like it was a very different mentality.
We came from a different place, lah.
Yeah, different model, right? And then the appreciation for it really started to change. Then I went to US for a while, came back, and then of course the fitness died there for a while, but slowly came back, and then I realized that over time it was really a way to perform better mentally.
It really
It's
does
not just
help.
about it's not just about the number of pull-ups or push-ups you can do, right? But like physical fitness really helps you become mentally more agile.
Yeah, it's the overall well-being that you feel, and then
Yeah.
furthermore, it's that responsiveness. All of a sudden, you got and it doesn't, and age doesn't help you, lah. Let's put it this way: we're
Yeah.
not young anymore, so we're not able
Yeah.
to really push that hard. But somehow or other, by keep maintaining a good physical regime or physical fitness regime, right? I think we can still be at relatively close to the peak, lah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now the evolution of fitness for me is the fact that you can live a quality life, without the aches and pains, lah. Like if I went to New Zealand with the family early this year, and for me, right, like doing a 10K hike, right, in a let's say a moderate region, right, in terms of difficulty, is doable. It's not easy, but it's doable. And that's the kind of life I want, right? I don't want to be able to do it like triathlon level known as this. For me, that's not the aspiration. The fact that I can enjoy life at a above average level, and be comfortable in that process is something I aspire for. So for me, fitness is now functional, more lifestyle centric, and then more mental than physical.
Oh, so you've already got that down already, as one of your building blocks, I would say, for your, or at least the blocks for your daily routine.
Yeah. I have a very I mean, I don't think a lot of people like this kind of model, but like I ascribe to it. And the thing is, I only developed this model in the last 4 to 5 years, where it's a structured routine model that's based on a quarterly goal system,
Oh,
and then a 13-week tactical breakdown of that goal.
wow. Okay, this
Yeah.
one sounds like very, very precise.
Yeah, no, it's actually very easy. It's a very straightforward, easy model. Companies in the startup space, right, where I'm in, use it all the time. I've just kind of applied the model to my personal life. It came about because there was one New Year's Eve, like, I went for this lame New Year's Eve party with the
Mm,
family and like balloon drop, right? And then as the balloon was dropping, that 1 minute drop, my life, I just looked back and I went like, what the hell did I do for the year, right? There was that feeling of like I really fucked it up, right? The whole year
mm,
went by. I cannot remember anything significant or valuable that I did, right? And I'm like, it can't be that I didn't do anything. Partly, I think is I didn't document it. Second thing is maybe I just wasn't clear about what I genuinely wanted, and that's what like kind of got me started on that journey of like documenting, planning, really being a bit clearer, right, of what I want to do. But the sweet spot is breaking it down to 13-week chunks.
right, right.
So
I
you at
mean,
least have the idea to change.
yeah. The thing is, I see that almost like an obsession, because you're so driven to like, wow, I have to make it happen. So do you feel
Mm.
that that's really your case? Like, there's this
Correct.
obsession in you.
Yeah. So there's a different school of thought, right? And people are like, oh, then your life becomes so rigid. But the the idea here, right, is that if you're able to do small experiments in
Mm,
the span of a quarter, you kind of really figure out what is it you enjoy doing.
yeah.
More importantly, what you don't enjoy doing, and you also like kind of force yourself to do experiments.
Right.
So there were quarters I remember that in the past few years that I did, right, where it was all about, let's say, I asked myself, okay, do I enjoy reading? I'm like, yeah, okay, but I read more business books. But for that particular quarter, I decided to find non-business books and make an effort to read them, right? So it's more about like setting up some level of goals to do things differently. And it was through that process I realized I actually genuinely don't enjoy reading non-business books. I see them as maybe I'm more visual, so I prefer movies, mini series, and all that. Books for me were like, I just cannot do it. Then I got into listening to podcasts in the last
Mm,
couple of years, also through experimentation. So there's people assume that there's a rigidity in terms of it, like, oh, it's a to-do list, but actually it's not, right? It's a series of like experiments that you put onto yourself to try out stuff or to hit certain benchmarks or to have certain goals so you have a direction and to also force yourself to try things.
mm.
One quarter where I just said, I'm going to try a new restaurant every 2 weeks,
Okay,
you
that
know.
works.
So that entire objective was driven around enhancing my lifestyle, being more sociable, making an effort to be more sociable, making an effort to go out more and spend time with my partner and come up with creative ideas.
Right. And do you think that this should be done by more people? Because the problem right now is that a lot of us try and find these like the TLDR, too long didn't read, too lazy
Yeah.
didn't read, and I just want the quick fix. I want the what 3 steps to do this, 5 steps to do that, 6 tips to do
Mm.
something, something, something. But the thing is, with all this, you never really get the details right of how to really apply that to yourself or even apply yourself to that.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I think it's important to discover what works best for you. Like when I knew you, right? If I were to tell myself then, right, that I would be that kind of person today, I'll be like, no way, right? Like
Mm,
I'm just not that structured or disciplined or rigid as a person. So for me, right, it's been a learning process over a period of time. And then I kind of just figure out what works. And the thing is, it changes. I remember there was a period, like the books example I gave you, right? Like I was hardcore into reading books. And then after that, it suddenly just stopped. So for me, right, like I think on a yearly basis, to some level, I think there's certain parts of me that changes. There's certain parts of me that figures out that, okay, I derive more satisfaction in certain other areas.
mm,
Like family for me was maybe not that big of a thing more than like 6 years ago. Today it's a huge part of me, and I make a more significant effort to do stuff with the family or spend time with the family. And I think that's the part, right? Like I think this whole phrase of you got to be true to yourself.
mhm.
I think you really have to find out what works for you. So for me, I try to see what I can try and learn from other people, right? Best practices. But at the end of the day, I internalize, see what works best for me,
Right.
and then execute it based on my own personality and interests. Not everyone can lead the Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey kind of lifestyle, right? Running two
Right.
companies at a time. Most people will die, lah, right?
Mm.
Yeah, so to each his own.
When you mention things like, oh, we learn from others, at the same time, right? I think it's a basic principle of we take what's good, what we deem is good and useful for us,
Mm.
and we apply it lah. But the thing is that all this came with a lot of maturity, and you had to have gone through some shit lah along the way, right, to be able to pick out, hey, I messed up. So what were those things that actually like went, I gotta piece this all together now?
Oh, I tell you,
It's a long journey lah.
there has been so many. I don't even know where to start. So there will always be the big life changing ones, that fall under the major buckets, right?
Right.
Whether is it family, relationships, work, or lifestyle. By lifestyle, I mean like hobbies, and then of course
Yeah.
the bad thing is like maybe you got into an accident that didn't allow you to do what you enjoyed
Right.
doing, that kind of thing. There will always be those big buckets, but then there will always be those micro failures,
Mm.
where like maybe you didn't live up to someone's expectation, maybe in a work setting, or you had a fight with a sibling, and I think like the important thing to realize that you have to move forward. It's very hard to get stuck in the past
Mm.
and then try to change it. The important thing is to realize, okay, where you are right now, what is done, try your best to make the best of it and move forward in the best possible way for both parties, right? Assuming it involves other people.
Right.
And I think maybe in the past I would want things to move at a pace that I felt was right. But now I realize that, everyone has a different way of dealing with things. If their way is the same as yours, great. It's good for everyone, right? But if their ways is not, right, I think to a certain level you got to respect it, support it, and then try and do your best to
Right.
make the best out of it.
I like what you mentioned. Like, it's I do believe in that whole butterfly effect kind of thing. Sometimes it's not the major things, that the big bucket items that just go, wow, your whole life has changed. But it's more, sometimes it's those small little things that just is that major reminder. The small things that all of a sudden remind you, hey, what am I doing? Why am I falling back into this trap again?
Yeah, I don't know if you know. There was this designer years ago that came out with this. I think it was like a chart or a design, right? That reminded you of like at a certain age in your life, how many birthdays you have left, or how many birthdays do you have with your parents, or how many Christmases that you have. And
Wow.
then when you put it up into a map, and then you can actually see in dots, right? And you realize that, oh my God, you actually don't have that many.
Mm.
That one I thought was very, very powerful because okay, so Diwali weekend just passed,
Mm.
right? And for me, right, as much as like for me, I've always dreaded the chore of all the prayer and family stuff. Like, I always look forward to the ang pao part, right? But like over the years, I've also realized that I only have a handful of Diwali celebrations left with my parents, and I should do whatever I can, right, to enjoy and cherish every one of them.
Mm.
And then with my sister, also my sister, my brother-in-law, and their son, right? Like I don't even know whether maybe in the next 5 years will they be living in Singapore, whether anything might happen. So like
Mm.
for me, right, I've learned to realize that you really everything is finite. At some point, right, the amazing experiences you have today will disappear, but the reverse is true, right? The pain you have today will also disappear. So like cherish the good memories and the good experiences, appreciate them, but also realize that the bad ones are there to teach you something.
Yeah.
And if you can make the best out of it, even better. But they will go away.
Mm.
It's very easy to say now when you're looking back. Like when I had to like with my own company, when I had to like fire half the team, not have enough money to settle the salaries at the end of the month. You just very little that can do, right, to help you move forward.
When was
And
this?
this was like way back in, let me see, 2016. Yeah, early 2016.
And what led
Uh,
to the whole, firing half the team? What was that part?
so there were multiple things, right? I think on if I would always believe that the buck stops with me and I take full responsibility, right? So fundamentally, it boiled down to a few things, right? There was the financial aspect of it. I think like we as an organization could have better managed the finances in the company to better prepare. Then there was the over expansion of the company 6 months prior, because we were expecting certain work to close, certain deals to come in, and then that didn't pan out. Basically, I don't know if you remember, but end 2015, early 2016, there was a bit of like stock market crash. People thought economy was going to
Mm.
collapse and all that. Yeah. And then there was also the aspect of me, right? I wasn't hands-on enough in the organization as I should have been,
Mm.
right? So a lot of these things, right, culminated then at one point, right? In I remember in early Jan where uh, my co-founder told me, "Hey, we can't make salary this month," and I'm like, "What are you talking about, right?" Like again, my this is where I said I should have been a lot more involved in the organization, especially in areas where like finance, where it's super boring but super important. And that's when I learned, right? Okay, our books were not as good as I thought they were. You know, there were a lot of issues with cash flow, blah blah blah. So it's painful learnings, lah. And
Mm.
then at some point, right, I distinctly remember one of my investors told me like, it happens to everyone at some point in their lives. The key is not to dwell on it, but just figure out like step by step what the plan is and how to get out of this mess.
Mm.
You know, and to just make sure you try your best to look forward. Because worrying about it doesn't solve the problem.
It's true. But the thing is that in your heart, right? I'm sure that, I mean, considering that, especially now, you're a lot more, I would say, emotionally invested into many other things as well.
Mm.
Did you ever feel like, I got to make it up for the half of the bunch that I had to fire?
You see, the thing is like you can only do the best you can do at that point in time, like
Mm.
within that situation, right? You have to be mindful that there's the half that you fire that you have to take care of, but there's also the other half that are staying behind for you that you also have to take care of.
Right.
You know, and then there are many other stakeholders in that process. You know, there's the investors who have trusted you with the money. There are customers, there are users. You know, they're fundamentally, I think at the end of the day, the people really matter. And I think at that point in time, like I look back, I genuinely believe we did the best we could to support everyone's transition out. And whoever who stayed back, right, we did everything we can to support their growth internally. um, I don't think I would have done anything differently on hindsight. But one thing, of course, I wish for is like I could have taken many more steps before that to make sure that that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But it's unfortunate, lah. Like like you need shit to happen sometimes to learn, lah.
Yeah.
And this is where I feel like uh, sometimes you don't need a bad thing to happen to learn. And in hindsight, right, I wish I had learned these important lessons earlier, lah, in a less painful way.
Right. Then at the same time, right, this would have probably opened up more like proactive learning on your end. It's like, because I know that this shit happened because of that.
Mm.
Now you can look 2-3 steps ahead of what else I need to cover. So what were those things that okay, it's time for me to go and study up some more and apply?
Yeah. So many things, right? Like I think um, the first part was, I think for us, right, was for me, was realizing that understanding how finance works in an organization is critical. And as much as I have a very trusted co-founder whom I still have, and I would
Mm.
do like I like he's like a brother from another mother, that kind, right?
Mm.
It's really important to know it yourself, right, and have a deep understanding of how it works, because finance is a tool. I think that's the one thing I learned from that process, and I use until today, both personally and professionally, that finance, money, cash is a tool. And if you know how to use that tool well and make use of it, then you can have very powerful effects from the process.
Right.
Right. So that's that technical element of it.
Mm.
The second part of it, right, is in realizing that different stages of a company's life cycle require a different form of leadership, right? And the kind of leadership that I was putting on, I think wasn't relevant to the stage of the company at that time. What I needed to be at that point in time was a more hands-on leader,
Mm.
which I did, right? There's a term called the peacetime versus the wartime CEO that Ben Horowitz wrote about.
Yeah.
That kind of details it very clearly. At which stages of a company's life cycle do you need to behave in a certain way? And for me, that transition was very clear. I went straight into a wartime mode and like got the company back in shape in a 6 to 9 month period.
Oh,
Yeah. And then
it's pretty
subsequently
amazing.
also making sure that there are difficult but painful decisions that had to be made. Whether it was cost cutting, whether it was maybe foregoing my own salary for the rest of the year, whether it was focusing on certain areas of the business that were more critical, those kind of things, like communicating with customers, communicating with the media, because of course competitors and other types of media would take advantage of such a situation, right? So a lot of stakeholder management, a lot of relationship management, those kind of things are painful but very necessary.
Right. Currently with E27, right? What's the next milestone for you then?
Yeah, so so COVID was a very good turning point for us this year. So if for those who are not so familiar with the business, right, like we're an ecosystem platform that directly dedicated to serving the startup community. So we're doing matchmaking with investors, matchmaking with corporates, those kind of things. And our primary business model is based on offline events. So we run like some of the largest tech conferences in the region. And that involves us having to fly around the region, picking the best companies and getting a lot of these people into Singapore. And of course, COVID completely killed that business.
Yep.
But the thing is this, for many years, we knew we needed to build up like a secondary revenue stream. But there are many reasons why it was that challenging to do, right? Like from a technology standpoint, we were not ready. From a cultural standpoint, we were not a product-centric organization. From a finance standpoint, like going to your shareholders and telling them that, hey, you want to cut your main cash cow to focus on this other future cash cow that you don't know about, was also fairly challenging. So there were many of these factors. But when COVID hit us, it was the perfect opportunity to do it because there was no other way to do it, no other way out, right? So for me, it was a good opportunity, right, to force everyone to learn, to put myself in a different role as well, and to have, in some sense, a level of excitement that we've not had in a while, because now it's a different model, right? It's not all about making sure we do what we did, but 20% better than last year. Now it was completely from ground up, having to rethink all over again, having to build new things, having to retrain everyone. The sad thing is, of course, having to remove team members that couldn't make that transition.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we didn't really have many of that. So it was very exciting. And this year, as much as it has been painful, it has been a very, very exciting year.
That's really amazing. I think everybody in the events industry in general, right, is pretty much in that position.
Yep.
Like, oh man, we need to make that digital pivot. So the thing is that webinar after webinar after webinar after webinar, what have you seen so far, right, that's actually a game changer in your eyes?
So we were very mindful of the fact that we did not want to transition to an online events company, right? I think I was lucky to realize early on that online events and tools like Zoom and all that, right, are going to commoditize the entire event space. So like anybody can do events now.
Yep.
And then once you have that saturation, right, you cannot monetize it the way you could with offline events.
Yep.
Plus the other thing is like we are a very regional centric organization. So even if Singapore is okay to run events here, it's pointless because we rely on the regional audience to make our events unique. So for me, right, I think like realizing that early on and making sure as an organization we don't fall into that trap was very critical, right? I did not fully appreciate some of the amazing online tools that existed for matchmaking and virtual events. Like we think virtual events are just like Zoom-like conversations, but now you have a full-fledged, like, you remember Second Life from years ago? Yeah, like those kind of environments right now that exist. So I think that was the one thing that really blew my mind, right? Like, wow, people are actually willing to go into a Second Life-like environment, do business deals, build relationships, network, and meet people. And I've actually spoken to multiple companies that have participated on these platforms and have had amazing ROI, all while working from the comfort of your home. So I think that's one big transition that has happened that I think has been phenomenal. The second thing is that this final realization that you really don't need to travel to do business or build relationships. A lot of it can be done virtually. I haven't met you for a very long time, but we are able to do this in the current context, because of the tools that exist. It's more sustainable. It's way cheaper and better for the environment. But it's also cognizant of the fact that now you can actually scale relationship building. Like the thing that used to annoy me about my previous business is that it was very, and this is quite an army term, time and space driven. So if you are a startup founder in, let's say, Vietnam, And if your company, was doing something amazing, but you were not in the right time frame of our events, you completely miss out on the opportunity. And we
Right.
miss out as an organization to support you. And that was the one thing that we used to get really upset by. Then you have the limitation of space. Like I can only help 100 companies a year.
Mm.
Why not 1,000, right? And that is the thing that really changed the game when we were able to pivot to being more of an ecosystem platform.
Right. And when you meant previous business, it's not exactly like before E27, but it was just previous business model, was it?
Yeah, basically before January 2020.
Right. Okay. Then what's very interesting about this year is really I still feel very strongly about this, that we can't look at events the same way as what we
Mm,
used to. Like exactly what you meant. Um, I think it's really about that going down back to the communities is that whole fundamental, right, of building up the people around you into that ecosystem and working with them to bring it back up again.
right.
People only want to see you on camera, or at least listen to you or talk to you if they'd be interested not just in the product but in you as a person and what you believe in. So it's finding those common goals and common values again, compared to so much on ROIs now. I think that's what
Yeah.
this year really means.
I think the business event space lost its compass in the last
Yeah.
few years. Um, um, I mean, I think that, like even we are in some sense part of the problem, right? Like year on year, right? People were measuring the quality and success of their events based on the size or the audience or the attendee levels or the number of exhibitors they had. And I think that, it's when you are building an event, it's a great thing to tell people that you grew the event by 3x, 4x, 5x.
Yeah.
When you reach a saturation point, right, where then everyone, like, you're just comparing with your competitors, oh, my event is double the size of theirs or mine is bigger.
Yeah.
And I think you lose the core purpose of why you do the events in the first
Mm.
place. Sadly, this is starting to happen in the online event space.
Yep.
But like, to me, that's where I think the value of events, the compass in terms of why events are amazing, have started to get lost.
Yeah.
And like for us, like that people keep telling us, so when are your echelon events coming, when and all that. And in a lot of ways, I keep telling people, look, we really don't want to, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole again, right? Where it's all about it's really like a egocentric comparison between different events. um, Event organizers, especially in the startup space, right, are very egocentric with respect to like who comes to my events, who supports my events, who
Mm.
supports my community. And I think that's not the like this year we've learned, right, that's really not the kind of organization we want to build. And we want to focus on the value that we are providing our user base.
Completely agree. I mean, don't be fooled by all the bells and whistles that come with it at this point in time. As it is like this. I like the point of the Second Life. Again, the interaction is one thing, right? The interface is one thing that's okay. And it brings back a certain sense of nostalgia because we're somewhat familiar, yet it still feels somewhat novel at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But more importantly, it allows you to really interact. My biggest fear has always been like, now they've got all the 3D booths and all these designs that go within the event space, right? You've been to a couple of them, but how many times do you want to keep clicking to the point then you're like, I'm kind of tired of this, I don't want to keep doing this. And then the opposite is those that run like a TV channel, just run
Yep.
content after content after content. So what, in your opinion, right, is the sweet spot lah?
I generally haven't figured it out myself because I haven't played very much with the event side, right? Like,
Mm.
um, I think there's that balance between matchmaking and content.
Mm.
I don't think just purely serving content all day long is the most relevant and
Right.
valuable thing. I think the content format has changed to more bite-sized level. Like, people are not going to sit down and listen to a 1 hour maybe keynote, right?
Mhm.
Maybe it has to change. The format has to change to be more bite-sized and condensed in a way where a lot of the key messages are derived. So I think for the transition between offline and online events, right, the the real value, right, is with respect to the post editing of the content as opposed to the original content in the first place. Like
Mm.
with a physical event, right, there's the idea and aura of like, oh, I'm sitting in front of an audience and the speaker that I admire is right in front of me over there. But in an online setting, it's really about getting the crux of the messaging and the value that you can take away. So I think on that level, post editing for content is the one thing for online events that change.
Right.
And then with respect to the booths and matchmaking, right? Like um, physically, right? It was all about going to the booth, having interactions with the let's say the person who's having their exhibit. But on the online side, you can actually derive a lot of that information through FAQs, cookie cutter models already.
Mm.
So I think there's, to a certain level, right, for people that interact with online booths, maybe there's a deeper level of interest. There's a deeper level of data that can be collected. There's a deeper level of like intent that people can follow up on.
Right.
And I think for the exhibitors themselves and the people that want to do matchmaking, right, you now can tap on like really high quality data, details of attendees that you maybe could not have done in the past.
Yep.
And you can even scale that up, right? Because you're not like physically stuck in the booth anymore.
Yep. Correct. Now you can bring it to them. And furthermore, the data that's being collected is on a much larger scale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, let's go back. Let's dial this back a little bit more, right? And more about you and how come, what's the obsession, I would say, with connecting an ecosystem together?
So I spent some time in the Bay Area,
Mm-hmm.
and this was quite a while back, right? And I realized like when I was a nobody, like also like as a student, right? Like I didn't even wasn't working in an organization that was maybe reputable or known. The culture there was to be supportive, was to help people out, and it was very paid forward culture, right? The company that I was working in, I was employee number one, so clearly no one knew the company.
Mm.
The founder also like was the founder was well known only in very specific verticals, email marketing vertical. But culturally speaking, like I could meet with very interesting high level people with no strings attached and no interest to get anything of value from me, other than the fact that make sure that our session is good to you and you bring it forward in future. So that kind of left like a lasting impression, right? And for me, I realized that when I came back to Singapore, right, Southeast Asia at that point in time, this was way back, this 2007, had a significant amount of challenges, like technologically speaking and all that, right? It was still very far behind the US. And in my mind, right, I felt that the governments are not going to be the ones solving these problems because they have their own like big issues to worry about. The corporates, on the other hand, were not going to be innovating fast enough to solve some of these problems, and they might not be focused on the end user, right? Like in the middle to lower markets that really desperately needed these solutions.
Mm.
So the only organizations that were going to do this were startups. And this was in an era, right, where nobody wanted to start companies. And so the entire ethos was like, okay, can we build an organization that supports tech companies, that supports startups, because they're going to be solving, problems that make the world a better place, as naive as that sound. Imagine if you had to live in a like in an era, right, where organizations like Grab, Deliveroo, like Grab Food, Uber, these kind of organizations don't exist. We might take it for granted when pre-COVID, but during this period, they have become very, very essential services.
Mm.
And if you look at the deeper down layers, like in the healthcare space with telemedicine, in the edutech space with all the e-learning stuff, like now these organizations have become essentials in some sense. So the whole pretext of our entire existence was like, what can we do as an organization to better support the growth of early stage tech companies? And that's exactly why we did it.
Mm. Okay, then as you went down that road, right? The thing is that did you feel that you were on a path that you were also trying to educate the ecosystem, or were you being educated yourself?
It was a mix of both, right? Where when we first started out, so we actually started with like, I think just over 20 people in NUS as a student community first. The idea was like, if we could support founders and maybe find our own co-founders in the process and start companies, then it's a win-win for everyone. So it was never intended to be a business. It was always intended to be a community at the starting part. So like the founders of Money Smart, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that financial tech platform, Zopim and a few other companies.
Yep.
We all came from that initial group of E27 founders. And along the way, right, like we started to do things that we felt were beneficial to the ecosystem. So initially, it started with a very simple tech blog, then it went to events, and for about 3 years, we even ran an accelerator in NUS.
Mm.
There was it's an accelerator called Garage. So half of us, half of the times, we were just figuring shit out. The other half of the times, right, we were learning about what was happening in the US and then educating the local ecosystem here, like looking at models that were popular there and then bringing them here.
Right.
So the incubator model or the accelerator model that we did, a lot of it was based on what was doing in the US. So in that sense, we were educating the market,
Right.
right? But on the event side and all that, we were learning as we went along. Because we are not journalists, we don't have events background. Most of us were tech guys.
Right.
I'm computer engineering. My co-founder is mechanical,
Mm.
so we were just figuring shit out most of the time.
Right. Fast forward to now. Back then, you were learning from the US, studying them, and Asia was behind. Now look at China. China's like way ahead.
Mm.
What is the step to pick up from them that you probably need to educate what's happening over
Yeah.
here?
Now, China is a phenomenal engine, and the couple of things that people really need to understand about China, right? One is that China is phenomenally amazing at localizing. Like the reason why a lot of the Chinese tech companies work so well in China is because they've copied from the best, whatever ideas from the rest of the world, and done a fervent job of localizing it to
Mm.
their local ecosystems. So if you study like Pinduoduo, if you study Meituan, WeChat, these are all products that exist in some form or another in other markets, but they are uniquely Chinese and they work really, really well in the local Chinese context,
Right.
right? The second thing is the copycat culture. A lot of people hate it. They think it's bad and all that. But what they don't realize is that uh, the copycat culture that China has drives innovation at a ridiculously fast pace.
Right. Because you set the
You know,
foundation first. The fundamentals are there. I mean, we used to joke about it all the time. Back then it was R&D, right? Research and duplicate. So
yeah.
then eventually, they turn it into their own. It's the exact same thing as what AI machine learning is doing. You model it after something, you duplicate and you replicate the action, and eventually you internalize it and improve.
Yep. So the Chinese were able to realize that copying quickly was just easy to go to market, but you had to localize it really, really well in order for it to work. You can't copy blind like wholesale,
It's true.
you know. And so those were the two things about the Chinese ecosystem that I thought was amazing. Southeast Asia has managed to develop its own unique flavor. Like every market in the region is kind of different, and you have to really go deeper into the nuances to really like figure it out, right? I think on some level, Chinese companies were Southeast Asia companies were heavily inspired by the US companies. This was maybe pre 2012,
Yep.
you know. And then as the Chinese tech giants started rising and as more Chinese investors and companies started coming to Southeast Asia, then there was this idea that, hey, maybe we could learn from the Chinese.
Mm.
There was even this era, right, where a lot of Japanese investors were investing in Southeast Asia, and they still are, but it was a lot larger then because they viewed Southeast Asia as a 1.0 version of what Japan's tech companies were.
Right.
And for them, it was about applying Japanese culture, Japanese style of thinking, and just making sure that they did things the same way that they did 10 years before, right? Which didn't end up working for a lot of organizations, to be honest.
Mm.
So Southeast Asia has gone through like many different cycles in terms of the culture they try and adopt, the model they try and work with, and now they're slowly settling for their own version. Like the reason why Grab was able to, in some sense, beat like Uber is because Grab kind of did follow a lot of the US type ideas, but they also borrowed from a lot of the Chinese type ideas, and they also heavily localized to the regional markets.
Mm.
Gojek and Grab, although they're very similar companies, they're radically different. And that's again another example of how Southeast Asian company has been able to really localize deeply within their market, in this case for Gojek's case Indonesia,
Mm.
and create something completely unique for that market.
Right, because every market has its own unique culture and its own unique set of needs. But wow, you got to go super deep to be able to really, really know this.
You have to, like I think there are a lot of concepts that people take for granted, right? That they think were developed in China or the US. But yeah, I give you a simple example, right? The idea for uh the idea for coupons being used for ride sharing was developed actually in Singapore. That concept, it was applied in Singapore. It worked really, really well in the Singapore market, and then it was brought globally. So there are little things like that we don't realize that actually are uniquely developed in this part of the world, but then become very mainstream globally.
Mm.
Um, so I think Southeast Asia at some point will end up leading the wave in terms of innovations. They just of course needs a bit of time to get to that level. But at some point, I don't think it will be. Are they like a Chinese company, or are they like a US company? Right? I think it will be a hybrid model.
So this hybrid model is going to be very much on, I would say, technologies applied across cultures at the same time, right? It still fits in a one local context. How does that even work out?
See, we have to remember one thing. A
Like
large
being a
part of
global citizen.
a large part of Southeast Asia is still unbanked. A large part of Southeast Asia still doesn't have access to fundamental tech. So I think on one level, right, it's about organizations that are educating the market and helping them get online, or helping them use technology to be more productive.
Mm.
Like that. Let me try and check this out. Like, there's a company, for example, called Buku Waro, that specifically focuses on helping small warungs, right, in
Yes,
Indonesia,
yes. Heard about this one
with
before.
like accounting and credit management, right? So, like, what kind of tech do you need? Do you need American type tech, or do you need Chinese type tech? And, and what they figured out is to build stuff that's really relevant for the market, right?
Yeah.
What is, like, on some level not too complicated, has a clean interface, and it's easy for, let's say, the mom and pops
Right.
to adopt. And it's definitely going to be a blend of Chinese American type
Yeah.
styles. But for them, I think it's that realization that they really need to go deep into the market. They need to educate the market.
Right.
They need to incentivize the market to get online. And then they, of course, need to find a way to work with the government to lay out their infrastructure to support that.
Right. Correct.
This is where I think there will be very uniquely Southeast Asian organizations that are going to thrive in this region.
Very interesting perspective on this. I mean, as the world continues to, I mean, wow, this was like many years ago we were talking about globalization, right? And having that globalization after that. Now it's really about just reaching everywhere and turning into one big melting pot of cultures and demands.
Yeah. See, that's the other thing of Southeast Asia, where you have to recognize that ASEAN is made up of what, 10 countries? I always forget, was it 10 or 11, but around there, right?
I gave my
Uh,
books back to school. Sorry, dude.
and within, so all these 10 countries are different. Now, within these 10 countries, if you look at, like, maybe Indonesia, right, you have many tiers of cities. You've got the top tier city like Jakarta, and then you've got, like, Malang, Jogja, Bandung, and every one of these cities have a different model, a different kind of, like, infrastructure level. You go to Thailand, and people, of course, look at Thailand and they think just Bangkok, right?
Mm.
But within Thailand, right, you've got your Bangkok, your Chiang Mai, your Phuket, your Chiang Rai, and all the next level of
Right.
cities. So it's realizing that it's way more of a gradient in terms of how the markets are open to technology. It's not as straightforward like I just go to Thailand and I get the whole market, or I go to Vietnam and I get the whole thing, right? It is going to require a different level of strategy, whether you are attacking a tier 1 market or a tier 3 market. And depending on your strategy, right, then you have to see, okay, what are the kind of technology services you're going to build? What are the kind of education level education services you're going to provide? And what's the kind of infrastructure that you're going to work with the local authorities?
Hey, well, you've done a lot of studying on all of this. I mean, where are you getting this information from? And do you have any tips on how one could progressively start picking up, let's say, for example, a brand new entrepreneur? Where do I even start, reading?
I mean, I'll tell you honestly, right? I'm very like, maybe 5-7 years ago, I was a bit more up to date on things. Now it has gotten to a level where the regional ecosystems are so complicated, right? That I'm like my level of knowledge is barely scratching it. I mean, on a simple level, yes, there are enough like sites in the region like E27, there's Tech in Asia, there's Deal Street Asia. Even within these three sites, they offer very different types of content already. You know, so on one level, there's the tech startup focused media sites that people can reach out to. Uh, on another level, there are also like deeper like WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups that people can go in and follow to get more, I would say, community level content.
Mm.
And then like events used to be a big way to get information through talking to people or attending sessions and all that. But there are also like very good like reports that are being generated on a yearly level. So Temasek and Google has this yearly report that I think they've been doing for 5 years now, and it's very specific. It's a report on the e-commerce market for this region.
Mm.
So they just recently came out with their 2020 version. I highly recommend people to go check it out. So you see, right, the ecosystem is now complex enough that Temasek and Google are able to create a e-commerce Southeast Asia report. It doesn't even talk about, let's say, health tech, AI, all the deep
Mm.
tech related stuff, right? For all of these verticals, there are typically organizations or like specialist groups that can target these areas.
Yeah.
Our sites, Tech in Asia, mostly focus on the high level generics, so it's more broad. I haven't even touched on the VC and the venture side. That's a
That one,
whole different
that's a whole
ballgame.
different thing. Yeah, correct, correct. Wow. Then with all that information at hand, right? The thing is that, um, how where does one even start to break it down and decipher? I mean, like say for example, when you all started E27 or
E27 actually like kind of started as a business in 2012. Like we came together, we registered the company in 2007, but for those 5 years, it was like I said, run more as a community.
right,
And it's only in 2012 that we, like me and my co-founder, came together and said, okay, let's do this as a business. And I remember we had like I think maybe 6 months runway in the bank, and we said like, okay, let's try this out, see how well we can monetize this, and whether we can make anything out of it. And yeah, it's become what it is today, lah.
right,
Yeah, so I and before that, like I said, I did some consulting work with mobile social gaming network. I had a gaming company. I worked at the edutech company, and then some random like consulting work.
right. If I mean, with all the experience already, right? Then you put it all together. But at the end of the day, right? Did you ever think that you would continue with the company, or what was the aim, to sell the company, or to really run this till, the wheels fall off?
Mm. See, so E27 is a platform for me, right? Like it gives me a lot of access to many different things. So, on the side, I do some advisory roles with certain companies. I've been in angel investing since 2013. I've been investing in the tech sector, yeah, like since for quite a while now. So that's like my bread and butter for me.
Mm.
I have an interest in that space. I invest in that space. I kind of spend most of my life there. So E27 is like the organization that I will hope to run for a long time. Now, in terms of whether I will sell the company and all that, right? I've always told like our shareholders, our employees, right? I say fundamentally, right? It all depends on how best can we give back shareholder value. Like if there's an opportunity to get acquired and then we become part of a larger company that's able to bring the organization forward to a whole new level, yeah, 100% we're in, right? If it requires me stepping down and taking a more non-executive role, bringing on a new team to bring the company forward, I'm 100% open to that. My thinking is this, right? Like the value of the company has to reside in the products it creates and the problem it solves and the customers it serves, and of course the employees that it brings benefits to. And that's way beyond me personally, right? If I can do it, great. But if there's another team, if there's another organization that can bring it forward, I'm more than happy to transition that.
Right. I mean, you've mentioned a lot about value to the customer, to the stakeholder, but I've always wanted to ask you about corporate culture, like
Mm.
being in so many companies, being in advisories and all that. Has there ever been a point whereby you go, look, we need to kind of rethink our corporate culture and define it as such and bring value to our staff? Was there ever such a topic that ever came up?
Yeah, definitely. In the early days, we didn't really care much for it.
Mm.
And then I think there was a big turning point in 2013 where we realized that, See, the thing is, in any company, right, as the company grows and gets prominence, it is very natural, I feel, right, for certain employees to feel like the organization will not be where it is without their effort. In some level, even the founders, egos start to take over the company. They start to put themselves or their personal brand above the organization. And I think every company goes through a variation of this in some form or another. So we had a version of that way back in 2013, and that really forced us to think a lot clearer what our mission was and what our core values were. It was at the back of our head, but when I did like a deep survey with the organization and really asked people, no one could really articulate it properly.
Mm.
So since 2013, we made a significant effort to write it down and to communicate it to every employee that joined the company and that was there. And when I do my quarterly town halls, I start the town hall with that slide. It's like an old uncle repeating this over and
Yeah,
over again, right? But I think there's something I learned in army. If you say enough number of times, it will be ingrained to memory, right? And then it becomes like part of muscle memory in that sense.
correct.
But
Either that or just keep doing push-ups until you get it right.
yeah, no, but on a deeper level, right? I think it's very important for people to genuinely recognize their core value, to generally like call out behavior that is not part of that core value, or even to call out behavior in a good way, right? If people practice that value, because if you don't actually do that, then the values are pointless.
Yeah, correct. And you something I also realized is that if, let's say, the core values, right, are not well communicated, the kind of people that you attract into the company is also kind of quite slipshod lah.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of my interview process to ask people like whether they've like read the core values, what are their thoughts around it, why do they think it matters, and see the word, for example, courage as a core value, for example, right, for certain organizations can mean very, very different things.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to know the core value, it's a different thing to be able to interpret it in a way that is relevant to the organization.
Yeah.
And I think this is where um, it's a process lah. You can't tell people the core value today, give them a 1 hour talk about it, and then expect them to be able to execute on it or do it. You need to very constantly bring it up. It needs to be part of the conversation, whether if it happens or it doesn't. So if you see people exhibiting the core values, talk about it. Like, oh wow, so and so did it, and they were like really good stewards of the core value. And the opposite, like, if it doesn't happen, right, make it an example, like show people how we could, like, the organization could have done better.
At the same time, we're always trying to balance work and life, or at least so-called work-life balance, right? In that sense, which in many places don't seem to exist. How do you, in this particular time frame, actually enforce that? Because working from home, right, has actually been one of the toughest things for work-life balance, because work has suddenly come into your home. So how do you enforce that?
Yeah. We implemented a unlimited leave policy, like I think it was a couple of years ago. It happened, right, because I had a conversation with one of my ex-employees. She gone to Sri Lanka for holiday, and I think she went there for like 5-6 days. So I told her, like, why do you come back so fast? And her reply to me is like, oh, I didn't have enough leave. And like I just felt like that was just so unfortunate, right? On one hand, right, I was telling her, why didn't you just ask me for it? And she had a puzzled look of like, I didn't know you were going to say yes, or should I even ask? But I'm only allocated a certain amount. It made me realize that, like, I don't want people to make decisions like whether they should take time off or whether they should do certain things or not based on like, oh, I only have a certain amount of leave. So I told everyone, I said, look, we're going to test out this model. All of you are adults. Take time off when you need it. If there's something you need to do with your family, if there's something you need to do with yourself, and if you need to be away, like, just do it. And just be mindful, right, of keeping your employees or your teammates updated. And making sure that, like, it's not at a level where you neglect your work. And I had one particular employee I remember who took well over a month of leave, uh, but he was a rock star. And he was very smart. No, he was actually a writer. He would get like a lot of like media companies to pay for his junket lah. Basically, they will fly him to certain countries around the region, around the world, in fact, pay for the entire thing, and then he writes stories and all that. And then this guy will always extend the trip by a few days, and he will take leave here and there. So you see, the beauty of this model, I realize, is this: he got an amazing experience from the organization. He was doing amazing work. It was a win-win for all of us.
Right.
And I think this is sometimes where organizations need to have an honest conversation with themselves. How can you better support your employees and your staff? So I think for me, leave was that one big thing. The second thing is check-ins. I take check-ins very seriously. Like reaching out to your colleagues, asking them how are they doing. You don't ask them, hey, how are you? Everything okay? Hey, by the way, can you reply to this email or can you do something? That's a fake check-in, right? I'm talking about a genuine 20 or 30-minute conversation when you're like, how are you? How are you feeling? What is new or interesting in your life, or what are you like facing challenges or issues with? And having that level of vulnerability with your teammates helps to build a deeper level of empathy and trust.
Right.
Yeah. For our meetings with my management team on Monday, right, we spend the first 20 minutes, which might seem a lot to a lot of people, but we actually spend the first 20 minutes individually talking about our life in the past week. How do we feel about work and how do we feel about personal stuff? It doesn't, it's not always good things, So like I have a team in Philippines. Last week there was a typhoon and it really hit people hard there. So they were talking about it. In some cases, people are like, I had a really shit weekend. Certain things didn't go well. Or I had an amazing time and this is what I did. And I think especially during the COVID-19 situation, right, it's become even more important.
Yeah.
In fact, just this week, I sent out a mass message to everyone, telling everyone to please take leave at the end of the year. Please deliberately force yourselves to take time off. Like, even though you can say that, I have nothing to do, I have nowhere to travel. No, just go take a day off. Go to nature. Go read a book. Go meet a friend. Just don't work.
Right.
For your own benefit, but also for the company's benefit.
Right. Because you allow them to rest. They basically they never come back 20-30%. They're always back at 100%. And
you have to. People need to have a life outside of work.
It's very important. I mean, we split among ourselves. Our friends, our family, our loved ones, and ourselves. So the thing is that we tend to neglect ourselves a lot.
Correct. If having a life outside of work means like maybe family, means sports, if it means entertainment, if it means reading, hobbies, if it means a side business. I have one employee who started a side business selling sneakers.
Sweet.
Right? Yeah. So I'm like, hey, dude, I'm waiting for the day where you make more money selling sneakers than in the company, right? And like to me, it's like it's really important to help people develop develop themselves outside of their office environment.
Yeah.
Like I'm a huge believer of doing many micro experiments, whether it's work or product centric, or whether it's in policies. I remember years ago I came up with this. Like I saw this other company doing this, right? I thought, wow, this is a brilliant idea. Brought it into the company. Basically, the idea was that every Friday we gather together and then we'd say things that we show appreciation for or gratitude for. It could be someone else's work. It could be something that they read. We call it Gratitude Fridays.
Okay.
And it ended up being such a failure in the company. And people would joke about it in a funny way, like because they ended up talking. It basically fundamentally it just didn't work for our culture.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, right? Like we realized, like after 2 sessions, it didn't work. We just changed and we moved on and we tweaked it.
Right.
So everything that we do, right, we are very open to the idea that hey, we're introducing this. It could not work, but we have to experiment, put some parameters on what success mean, and if it works, good. If it doesn't work, cut, move on. At least we tried.
Yeah.
I was part of a startup forum for quite a few years, and one of the things that they did, right, in order to build vulnerability, but to get to know each other better and to introduce new members, is this thing called a lifeline. So in 20 minutes, you had to basically draw a map, right, an XY map, And from the age 0 all the way to your current age, map out like all your highs and lows on a scale of 10 to minus 10. So let's say the age of 1 it's probably a 7 because everyone's happy at that age.
Yep.
I would say maybe 10, right? At the age of maybe 12, maybe you screw up your PSLE, so it's a minus 6. So you have a map of your life and you tell an entire story about all the ups and downs in your life that led to who you are today.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, that was a really nice experiment like we used to do. So when we first started the forum way back in, I think, 2015, all of us did this, and you had to present it to each other, and it's all confidential. That's the rule. And then for every new member that came in, they would present it to the team as well. And I can tell you, in that 20-minute period, pre 20-minute period and post 20-minute period, you build a certain sense of empathy and trust with that person. It could be both ways, right? You could be more trusting or less, right? That you cannot do in a lot of other ways. My point is this: there are many amazing ideas that can come up from organization culture and all that. Fundamentally, right, what managers need to do is to not be afraid to experiment and try. And if it fails, right, so what?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: if it actually works, it fundamentally transforms your team.
Agreed.
So if you read Radical Candor, I think if you read Netflix's book on culture, right, there are a ton of ideas. Right? The key is just, okay, let's experiment, try, making sure you have the right company culture to support it, and then do it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that, you're able to do that. I mean, right, correct. And now we're on the topic of self in that aspect, right? Now, personal leadership, I do want to ask as well, right? Like on your end, is there a model that you follow?
A model that I follow.
Now, there's a very interesting thing that I brought up, or at least, sorry, a very interesting conversation I had with one of my other friends as well. It's about the internal dialogue that you have with yourself. Half of the time, some people become dismissive and say you're crazy, but it's important to talk to yourself. And that kind of helps, or at least is shaped by your own personal leadership, what you believe in, where you're going, what you tell yourself. Is there a certain model or framework that you work with?
Yeah, I think self-coaching is very, very important, right? It has to, so it has to move in a direction that's productive, right? If you do it in a way like that it's meant to dwell on the past or just get negative, right? At some point you have to figure out, how do I move this forward in a productive manner so that I can move on from the issue, right? Or I can figure out the problem. I'm not sure what kind of model that you're referring to, but like what I shared earlier, right? Like, I try my best to reflect on my week, usually on a Sunday evening, right? And this comes through journaling, a bit of journaling, and a bit of just like general self-talk. Why I do this is because I think it's very important to look back and go, what could I have done better? What was good about the week? What was not so good about the week? And I actually then, right, put a score on a scale of 1 to 10 for two factors. One is the feeling, and the other one is achievement. And why I ask this is why I do it this way is because, right, like there might be some weeks, right, where I have achieved nothing, but I feel amazing, and I want to be able to recognize that. And there's the total opposite too. There's some weeks where I've achieved a lot, right, but I felt really shit. And of course, the ideal is to have both, right? But like, to me, there's this recognition and realization, right, that you don't always have to feel great to be happy. You don't always have to achieve a lot to be happy. It's all about that balance. Like, there's certain weeks that were absolutely horrible, but we ended up like doing a lot of things, right? And then you look back and you go like, okay, I think I had to take that pain in order to grow. And so that kind of journaling where on Sunday nights I do to reflect back is one thing. But then I also do the same forward. Like, I look at the week before going in and ask myself, okay, this is the upcoming week. This is how it looks like. These are some of the things I need to do. These are some things I should not be doing. Like, simple issue I have a lot now with is sleeping late, or waking up late, that kind of thing. So I have this premeditated expectation, right, on how I believe the week should be, or what are the issues I need to look out for, right? Like a simple example is that, okay, let's say if I was to be doing one for next week, I know I'm going to be meeting some close friends on a Wednesday night. And one of the big things I need to make sure I don't do is like go crazy and drink too much and ruin my Thursday morning. So these are little things I'll do self-talks on, like, okay, I have to be mindful about this. I have to make sure that I'm pumped about certain things, or I have to be wary about certain things. I'll write that down, come up with the week's plan, and then do the same cycle again. On Sunday, reflect back, go back and read it and say, did I, was I true to myself? Did I follow my model? What changed along the way? And sometimes you just have to be honest, if you, like, some weeks I'll be like, fuck, I just didn't feel like exercising. Or I just didn't feel like doing what I wanted to do, and I just wanted to throw away the entire plan. It's okay.
Yeah. Nice. Then, in your opinion, right, based on all these learnings that you've had over years, especially to be successful, I think, what is the most critical skill that you would want somebody to have?
What has worked is just pure resilience. Yeah, it's really just, I think, I don't know if grit is the right word, but it kind of like somewhat similar, right? Like resilience, don't give up, grit.
Yeah.
See, fundamentally, you just cannot give up. You just have to find a way to push hard. You have to find a way to like pull yourself out of the deep end. And occasionally it's okay to fall and just sit there and chill, right? But you always just have to find a way to get back up. And I think that's what separates, that's what has helped me be, I won't say successful, but get to where I am today.
Right.
It's the same logic with exercise. It's the same logic with, maintaining a good diet, with work, with relationships. You just cannot give up. The day you give up, you die.
Moving forward, right, I do have a short rapid fire questionnaire for you, if you'd be willing to take it.
Yeah, I'm really bad at this, for sure.
Never mind, it's okay. Like what you said, have some grit, you'll be fine. All right, so Mohan Belani and the EPIC questionnaire, are you ready?
Sure.
All right, one word that you love the most.
It's okay.
One word that you dislike the most.
Cannot.
If you could have a conversation with one person, fictional, non-fictional, dead or alive, who would that be?
Darth Vader.
What do you say to yourself in the mirror every morning?
Be true to yourself.
Favorite dish to eat? This one's toughest. For a Singaporean, this is the toughest.
Favorite dish to eat?
Anything you say betrays your culture for some reason.
Tough one. Chicken rice lah. Yeah, I really have to say chicken rice.
There we go. Favorite travel spot?
Philippines.
Next travel spot once borders open up?
New Zealand.
New Zealand. Why?
I think there's just something about that place, the energy, the aura, and the feeling.
Something in the arts that you've always wanted to do, but yet to do so?
Oh, probably more music.
Produce, is it?
No, specifically play more instruments. Like, I think I used to learn the piano when I was a kid, but I never really took it seriously. And I've always wanted to learn the guitar, but never also took it. Never really pursued it properly. So if I had to go back and do that, yeah, it would be maybe more guitar or more drums.
Guitar is easier than piano, that's for sure.
Oh, really?
Take it from me.
Oh.
What does retirement look like to you?
No retirement.
No such thing.
Nope.
And how do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
What's my legacy? I don't believe in legacy. I think people, I actually don't like the idea of focusing too much on leaving stuff behind for the world, because it's just too egocentric for me.
But if given a choice, how would you want to be remembered?
A champion for the underdogs.
Sweet. All right. Thank you very much, Mohan. Now stay on the line, okay? Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, Mohan and myself, for this epic podcast. It's been great, just chatting. And I'm glad that you joined us as well. So if you like all the content that we have. Just subscribe, comment, do what you need to do. Give us your feedback if you can, because we got to keep this going. So we'll see you next week. Thanks again for joining us, Mohan. Take
My
care.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.